In this video, I'll show you how I gave 2 old, tired IKEA HEMNES Nightstands a new lease of life. I'll also show you how to create this wood grain effect using nothing but paint. It's an easy, budget-friendly makeover that you can use on damaged, dated or thrifted furniture, including laminated pieces like these HEMNES Nightstands. I've had these nightstands for about 12 years. Over time, the tops got damaged and started to delaminate around the edges. I was actually thinking of getting rid of them, but they were still solid, and I already had leftover paint and some vintage handles from another IKEA project, my rust cabinet hack, so instead of throwing them out, I decided to refinish them. I took the nightstands partially apart for painting, removing the drawers, the handles and the tops. Since I was changing the handles, I filled the old holes with wood filler, then I lightly sanded everything so the paint had something to grip onto. And don't worry if you don't have a sanding machine, this can easily be done by hand. In fact, most of this project I sanded by hand. Now for the fun part, painting. My rough plan was to layer a few shades of grey and beige, loosely matching the wallpaper I used for the headboard. I was aiming for a slightly worn, vintage look. That's actually a very forgiving style to paint and to live with. Any future scuffs and chips just add to the charm. I started with a dark grey base layer. I like starting dark so that any worn areas around the edges reveal a darker tone instead of the original IKEA white. I used the paintbrush for everything. You'll notice I always brush in the same direction, with the grain so to speak, even though there wasn't really a wood grain to begin with. That brushing and the layers is what actually creates the wood grain effect. Once that was dry, I went in with a slightly warmer, lighter shade, again brushing in the same direction. After that, I feathered in a few darker and lighter tones with partial coverage. No strict formula here, just what felt right. I waited for each layer to be dry to the touch before adding the next, and I didn't sand in between. At this stage it might look questionable, but if everything goes to plan, it will come together during sanding. I used 3 sanding blocks, rough, medium and fine in that order. I did all the sanding by hand so I could better control where to apply pressure, especially around the edges. Around the edges I stuck mostly to the finer grits so I didn't sand too far back. Here's my quality check after sanding. After this I did a few light paint touch-ups here and there, just until everything looked perfectly imperfect. Once I was happy with the look, I moved on to the finishes. I sealed the sides and drawer fronts with finishing wax, applied with a clean microfiber cloth. Super easy, very forgiving. For the tops I used a couple coats of matte varnish. Vintage or not, nightstands should probably survive coffee, water and late night snacks. Varnish gives it just a bit more protection here. Finally, I added the new handles. I used masking tape to mark out the 2 screw holes. This helps make sure that the handle is centered and both screw holes sit at the same height. Quick and easy. Then I put everything back together. Done. Here are a few close-ups of the finished look. Brushing the paint created this subtle wood grain texture, and the layered colors give it that worn, vintage feel. Here's the before and after. I'm actually really happy how these turned out, especially considering I was about to throw them out. Instead, I now have a matching pair of nightstands that work perfectly with the headboard. Not bad, I reckon. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Here's the final before and after. If you enjoyed this IKEA makeover, you might also like the IKEA rust hacks I did. I'll link them in the description. Thanks for watching!